5, 4, 3, 2. Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Katz, and welcome to Tuesday's edition of WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle, where we tell it like it is. Friends, Inside the Trojans Huddle is a game-like panel discussion posted on Tuesdays in the off-season, twice during the regular season. The huddle features WeAreSC columnists, staff writers, and historians. We first start off with the pregame show, where we introduce our panel members for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, then give you the latest USC Trojans football news. Now let's meet Tuesday's panelists, a WeAreSC columnist who writes WeAreSC.com's The Monday Morass, Yay or Nay, and Sunday Takeaways. In addition to regular season football and basketball reports, he also hosts his own podcast show entitled Locked On USC. That's Marc Kulkin, the editor-in-chief of WeAreSC.com. He's a columnist, a national recruiting guru, and a graduate of USC, Erik McKinney, a former William Jewell College defensive back and WeAreSC.com columnist who writes the popular WeAreSC.com column Musings with Arledge and has his own weekly WeAreSC.com video show, Musings with Arledge Solo Edition, and he's a graduate of the USC Law School, Chris Arledge. And as a program reminder, this week on Musings with Arledge Solo Edition, Chris interviews former Trojans quarterback Shane Foley. And finally, a weekly WeAreSC columnist who writes Fridays the Obvious and Not So Obvious, IMHO Sunday, and is an active member of the Football Writers Association of America, your moderator and producer of Inside the Trojans Huddle, Greg Katz. Before we kick off this Tuesday's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, here's a recap in USC football news. The big news, of course, on Friday was that USC Athletic Director Mike Bohn had resigned his position effective immediately. And according to the Los Angeles Times, Bohn's unexpected resignation came after criticisms over his management of the athletic department, accompanied by allegations of gender misconduct directed at women and job performance irregularities. USC President Dr. Carol Folt said that a transition team comprised of both internal and external leaders would be announced in the coming days, and that USC will shortly conduct a national search for Bohn's replacement. More on this major USC story coming up in the first half of the huddle. And on Saturday, Trojans head coach Lincoln Riley released a Twitter tweet thanking Mike Bohn for his service at USC, and the coach looked forward to the USC future with positive and reassuring words moving forward. In other news, the Trojans began their initial big recruiting push, which began last Thursday for the class of 2023 by hosting a 4-star safety, Braylon Conley from Humboldt, Texas, and Acosita High School. On Friday, recruits on official visits included 5-star wide receiver Bryant Wesco from Midlothian, Texas, Midlothian High, 4-star defensive lineman Edric Houston from Buford, Georgia, Buford High School, 4-star safety Miles Davis, Converse, Texas, in Judson High School, 4-star running back Christian Clark from Phoenix, Arizona, Mountain View Point High School. A reminder that the recruiting division of WeAreSC.com, headed by Scott Schrader and assisted by Marshall Levinson, can be heard daily during the week for our premium subscribers. And don't forget to watch Friday's WeAreSC.com's recruiting roundup video show with host Dylan Brasher and Scott Schrader. Friends, WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojan Huddle greatly appreciates your viewer and listenership, and we encourage those of you watching on sites like YouTube to click on the red subscriber and like buttons. It's greatly valued. It's free. You can also listen to Inside the Trojans Huddle on many available podcast sites. And a reminder, WeAreSC.com is offering a subscription special. You can get all the WeAreSC premium content for 6 months at $29.99 or $9.99 for 1 month. So with that, it's kickoff time. Let's get ready to get this show ready and started. So panel, here we go. In a shocking and unexpected development on Friday, Trojans Athletic Director Mike Bohn, 62 years old, resigned his position effective immediately after being hired for the USC AD job in 2019. Bohn was, according to the Los Angeles Times, resigned over alleged criticisms over his management of the athletic department, but he is credited with helping bring head football coach Lincoln Riley to USC from Oklahoma, and was a major part and instrumental in the process of transitioning USC from the Pac-12 conference to the Big Ten conference in 2024. So with that background, panel, your thoughts and reactions, good, bad, ugly, concerning the immediate resignation of Mike Bohn as USC's athletic director, and should he have resigned given the circumstances? As always, we lead off with Marc Kulkin. Marc, what do you say?
Yeah, quite a Friday news dump, huh?
Quite a Friday news dump, no doubt about it.
So, based on the way the information kind of trickled out of Heritage Hall, the question you ask is, should he have resigned? I don't think he really had a choice. I think it was going to happen eventually. So, you get the statement from Mike Bohn. Thank you. I'm, going to pay attention to some health concerns and spend time with my family. Okay. Maybe that's why he's resigning. A few moments later, Carol Folt, USC, releases their statement, and there's a cordial thank you in there somewhere, but no mention of his health concerns. So you're right off the bat, all right, something's wrong. And then obviously you've got the whole LA Times article that's, kind of stirring the pot. So again, based on what we know, the non-specific allegations and the firm that was doing the investigation, I think eventually there would have been no choice for him to resign, because you're not going to win that narrative today. But it's the off season. Maybe it's the perfect time to pivot and go in a new direction. But as far as my initial reaction, surprise. And yeah, eventually he was probably going to have to step down.
All right, Erik McKinney, good, bad, ugly. Your thoughts? Should he resign?
Well, it's ugly. I mean, anytime you're throwing something like this around at USC that's on the heels, seemingly in perpetuity, of another thing like this, and it's just again. Yeah, it's ugly. Based on what has come out, and especially for me, the two things that stand out are one, something you said, which kind of puts the whole thing together, where a lot of focus was on the treatment of women and workplace and all that kind of stuff. The way you put it, job performance irregularities, like that's something people should focus on also. It's all of it together. If you're the boss of somebody who's having job performance irregularities, it's absolutely within your right to say, hey, we can't do this anymore. We have to make a split. And then the one big point that stuck out to me was when USC went out and brought in that law firm, and especially who came in, Gina Miso-Smith. That tells me they already knew, right? Carol Folt already knew what was going on. We need someone to come look at this. That doesn't feel like you're making a decision to bring her in with the hope that, oh, she's going to find everything's okay. So it felt serious the moment that name got dropped, and when you have so many things. And then the way it happened, clearly both sides, to me at least, both sides had gotten to a point where it was, this is not going to work anymore, and we need to move. And again, the timeline suggests that while it was surprising, it was inevitable and probably coming for a little while. I don't know if we're going to find out that there's some big thing that's not out yet, and this is a one reason, and here's the bomb. I think it's just that when you get to a point where a huge bulk of the people working for you are uncomfortable working for you and feel like you're not doing your job, that's going to go up the ladder, and decisions are going to be made. It's two different points. It's what he did inside and how he treated those people and how people felt working for him, and then how USC fans are going to judge his performance, which if he is based on what coaches did he hire, promoting Quincy Watts, keeping Andy Enfield, going and getting Lindsey Gottlieb, getting Andy Stakowitz at baseball, hiring Lincoln Riley, that's 5 decisions that immediately now, and I think as we go longer, are going to show that in terms of his job performance, what you saw from the outside, is pretty much beyond reproach and a really fantastic record. So yeah, two ways to really look at that, but clearly kind of what happened, both sides had gotten to a point where everybody kind of knew what was going to happen, and this is how it was. But Marc's right, surprising, right? When that news first came out, that is not what you were expecting to hear on a Friday afternoon.
Chris, Arledge, you had a unique piece that you wrote that came out almost right after it happened. You're a lawyer. You look at things from a legal standpoint. What did you glean from this whole situation? On one hand, good, bad, ugly. On the other hand, should he have resigned as a lawyer's perspective? Your thoughts?
Well, when you say resigned, he left because he was told he had to leave. I mean, I think we know that. Now, it may be a resignation in the sense that he cut a deal with USC. That deal almost certainly meant that he would not sue USC. He probably got a check for it. And there's probably some sort of confidentiality provision in place. And which would explain why people inside Heritage Hall who were unhappy with Mike Bohn may have gone and fed information to the LA Times because they're unhappy that the story's not going to come out. That's my best guess. Here's what, look, I've been a litigator for a long time, and here's what I know. Even if you hear one side story completely, prospective client walks into my office, they sit down, they tell me this is what happened. I know immediately that that's not exactly what happened, all right? Because everybody sees their own situation through their own goggles. They have self-interest. Even if they're trying to tell the truth, it's hard to be objective about yourself and what you've done and your weaknesses. It's very difficult not to intentionally or otherwise slant the facts in your favor and downplay the stuff that makes you look bad. That's if you actually hear from one side. If you don't hear from either side, and you just have snippets from somebody who's probably disgruntled at USC, and you don't know who the source is, you don't know what happened here. That's the reality. We don't know. I can't form any judgments that make any sense. I can imagine situations where Mike Bohn was fired because he made statements that may have been received not so well by people who worked for him, but which we would also say, yeah, but they're being unreasonable. But I could also imagine things that you could say to a female employee who works for you that would merit an immediate firing. And I don't know which of these situations took place here, right? I just don't know that. We're probably not going to know that ever. So I'm not sure what to say about that, other than to say that it's not a resignation. It is probably a settlement agreement, and one that's going to keep a lid on a lot of the facts. Stuff will trickle out, but we're not going to hear from Carol Folt. We're not going to hear from Mike Bohn. We're probably not going to hear directly from any employees that complain. So what do you make of that? What you make of that is you probably don't really know what's going on. Here's what I do know is going on, though. USC fans for a number of years were in a position where it seemed like the people calling the shots inside Heritage Hall were either incompetent or didn't care, or both. And this went on for years. And as a result, we had terrible leadership over the football program for years. And the football program was a giant grease fire for years. And there was a raging debate amongst USC fans of, does the university even care about winning anymore? And nobody knew the answer. And the good money, I think, was on no. We thought we won that. The people who actually care about USC football, we thought we won that. Because you have the move to the Big Ten, you have Lincoln Riley's hiring. They clearly had committed substantial resources. They clearly had made promises to Lincoln Riley about the resources and the support he would get. Otherwise, he never would have taken the job. And so we looked at it and said, we won. USC does care. They are committed. They're going to make this happen. And now that's all up in the air again. Because the reality is that when it comes to any institution of higher learning, there are a whole lot of power centers who don't necessarily care about football success the way we do. They have a whole lot of other interests that are foremost in their minds. We don't have to go through what all of those are, but some of them are pretty obvious in terms of the the football athletics department versus academics and the perceived battle between the two. Whether or not football is going to be so much more important than all of the other smaller non-attend sports that people don't go to. Not to say they're not important, but people don't show up. They don't make money. Is football going to drown those out? Cultural issues, political issues that come to the forefront when you're talking about hiring a major figure at a university. There are all kinds of things that go into this. And now we now are no longer certain whether we won, because we don't know what's going to come down the pike. And at USC, major hirings more often than not mean bad hirings. I'm not saying that's going to happen here. I'm just saying, if you've been following USC for the last 40 years like I have, you can point to a whole lot more stupid hires than you can good hires. And so now that we have somebody who's going to have to weigh in on all kinds of big decisions, we can talk about that stuff a little later. But somebody's going to have to make some gigantic decisions, not normal athletic director stuff. And we have no idea who that's going to be. And we have no idea what considerations will go into hiring the person who's going to do that. And ultimately, we have no real reason to believe that they're going to make a good hire, because USC usually screws it up. And that's the ugly from this situation, from my perspective. And if you're asking whether I'm worried, yes, and for good reason.
All right. Well, I will say that, like everybody else, I was shocked. I saw it on a Twitter feed and I thought, what is this all about? I knew immediately after the standard template of I'm leaving for family, my treasured quote unquote family considerations and health, which I understand is a real thing with him, with Mike Bohn. But the whole thing, it's kind of reminds me of I know, Chris, you're a big movie buff. It reminds me of kind of The Godfather, when I think it was Al Pacino says, paraphrasing here, every time I try to get out of this, they drag me back in. And I felt like, okay, here SC's finally gotten it right. Great prospects for the football program. It's leading the way, et cetera, et cetera. And, nothing can stop it now. We're going to the Big Ten. That's exciting. And then this drops. And I go, okay, I'm being dragged back into something that I thought we had gotten out of our system for a while. And this opens up a big can of worms, including everything that everybody's already said. Where it's going, I hope that the selection process will be one that does hire someone who is capable. We'll talk about that later, but I want to move on here. How will Mike Bohn be remembered at USC? Mark?
Erik already rattled them off the reasons. I mean, it's plain and simple. The coach he hired for the football team, the coach he hired for the women's basketball team, the retention of two existing coaches, Andy Anfield and Quincy Watts, the hiring of the baseball coach. Oh, by the way, the transition to the big conference out of the Pac-12. And then you've got this. So I don't know, in a year or two, if we get nothing else than what we've learned, he's going to be remembered as probably the greatest athletic director in USC history. That's the nuts and bolts of it.
Well, let me ask Erik. You've already kind of, as Mark said, kind of given us your perspective on this. Is he the greatest athletic director in USC history, perhaps?
Right when he was hired, the only thought was he is going to be judged for however long he's at USC on who he hires as the football coach to replace Clay Helton. I think that's probably still the case. And Lincoln Riley's success or not success for his tenure at USC, I think still has a lot to do with that. The other sports, yes, it's great. It's right. It's great when USC does well at the other sports. It matters when USC is good at football. And so I think that's still to be determined, right? If Lincoln Riley leaves in 2 years, or if things don't go that way, or whatever it is, I don't think anyone's betting on that, but I still think we're kind of deciding that. But yeah, for most USC fans, that's going to be how they judge him is he brought Lincoln Riley. What did Lincoln Riley do at USC? And honestly, at USC, for a lot of its sports fans, that's really what it has come down to forever.
Chris, what are you going to remember? What's his legacy to you?
Yeah, the guys have already touched on. Look, Mike Bohn won the Athletic Director of the Year award. I mean, objectively, his performance, the stuff outsiders can see, has been fantastic, right? Was that Brandon Sosna? Was that maybe? But it doesn't matter. That was the guy he brought with him. You get credit, right? If you hire bad people and it turns out badly, you get blamed. If you hire good people and it turns out good, then you get credit. I don't know. What was he not? It sounds like that, sometimes he wouldn't show up to work. I don't. How do I know that? I'm not there. I'm not checking his attendance. I don't know what he said to people. So all we know is that Mike Bohn made a series of good moves, but he made probably the biggest, most shocking head coach hire in decades, at a time when USC so badly needed to hire somebody that was competent and could give the fans and recruits and high school coaches and other people confidence that the program was headed somewhere good, instead of just continuing to rage in this grease fire that had been for so long. So that right there means that Mike Bohn is an all-time great athletic director at USC, even if nothing else comes of this. It may be that he deserved to be fired. I have no idea. But I also know that he's going to be remembered as the guy who brought Lincoln Riley to USC when we had been watching Clay Helton for 6 years. And that alone is enough for me to have fond memories of Mike Bohn until the day I die.
Well, we hope that doesn't happen too soon.
Well, I mean, I don't know if everybody hopes. I hope.
Yeah, I think the two things that he'll be remembered for is obviously Lincoln Riley and transitioning to the Big Ten, and that's something that will last for a long, long time. But I think he's underrated when he hired like Andy Stankiewicz for baseball. When I was growing up, the USC baseball program was like right there at the 1, 2, or 3 in the country year after year with Rod Dato and that group. And he brought back some hope to that sport. And the thing is, he was asked to do something that none of the athletic directors either did or were able to do. He took them out of the darkness and gave people hope. He backed it up with the Lincoln Riley thing, and he will always be remembered for that. It actually is a tragedy the way it's ended, because he did do some things that are going to be positively long lasting, we hope. So panel, how much responsibility for the Bohn resignation falls on the shoulders of USC President Dr. Carol Folt? Mark?
I think a little bit. I mean, she was part of the, hiring process, the vetting team. Man of integrity, I believe, was the words used when he was introduced. So again, based on what has been released through the media, if this goes back to his days at Cincinnati, he's coming on the heels of the George Tyndall situation, the dean of the business school, if we're talking about job performance, the dean of the medical school who was out partying, doing everything. So, Chris touched on it earlier. This is just another step of, oops, we did it again. Look, that's why they brought in an investigative firm that they were going to find something regardless, but did it rise to the level of him being asked to leave for whatever reasons he's being asked to leave? Now, so how much of the responsibility is hers? Again, a little bit. Now we're going to find out how well she does vetting the next person, because this is a crucial time. This next AD, they're stepping into some big shoes, huge shoes.
Erik, how much of this is accountable to Carol Folt?
More than a little bit, all of it. I mean, right? Not how things went, but the hiring, right? Bringing him in, yes, and you don't immediately say, well, if he has to leave, she has to leave. You can bring in people with sort of this kind of work ethic and to create, whatever atmosphere and see how it goes. Because again, if if Mike Bohn brought in Brandon Sosna and gets credit for what Sosna did and the decisions he made, then Carol Folt gets the credit for Lincoln Riley and the coaching hires and that stuff too, because she brought in Mike Bohn, right? So all of that kind of goes together. And then once you have established, okay, we're heading forward, now this partnership no longer works and we're in a different stage of the athletic department now we don't need this, now this isn't a fit, then she has, I mean, again, she's the decision maker. She has every right to be able to now say, we don't want to go this direction. So if we're talking about Mike Bohn being the greatest athletic director maybe ever at USC, then she hired the greatest athletic director ever at USC. So again, there's so many different ways on kind of what internally this looks like and what externally this looked like. She may have made a absolutely brilliant decision of, we need this guy for a few years to do this, and then it's not going to work, and then we need to go a different direction here. But yeah, the result of bringing him in, and again, like Chris said, not that we can definitively say letting him go, but certainly that kind of seems to be what happened. Yeah, that's on her plate. I mean, big decisions or big positions, right, require big decisions that have big consequences for kind of everybody involved. And you want to, right, you want to throw some. USC used a search firm, Turnkey Search, which has put people in huge position. The current NCAA president was a result of a turnkey search here. And those search firms have kind of been able to, hey, yeah, hire this guy. And then if something goes wrong, kind of back away from it. But that's the case, right? They've kind of positioned themselves to be able to do that. And that's just kind of an understood byproduct of when they give you that. And it's how much you want to look in, right? If your friend tells you, hey, you should go to this restaurant, and that's all the digging you do and it's terrible, you probably should have done more digging. Not that these are kind of comparable situations, but in that idea. But yeah, the hiring him, firing him, all of that stuff, everything in between, it all goes back to Folt.
Chris, do you agree with Erik on this one? Is she culpable for this? How much?
Well, culpable has a value judgment in there, right? I mean, is she culpable, or because she did something that she shouldn't have done because the facts didn't support it, or did she do something she had to do because the facts required it? I don't know. I'll say this: there are two people that could be responsible for this. One is Carol Folt, because she's the ultimate decision maker. But the other person that could be responsible for it is Mike Bohn. I don't know what he did or didn't do, but you can imagine hypotheticals, which I'm not going to air, where he did something and everybody says, I don't have a choice, right? Now, is that what happened? I have no idea. Again, let me be very clear before you start leaving comments on YouTube talking about how I'm attacking Mike Bohn. I'm not. I have no idea what happened. But Mike Bohn could theoretically be responsible for 100% of this. It's also entirely possible that Carol Folt is responsible for 100% of it. But we know she made the decision, so ultimately she owns it. And Erik's right. I mean, look, there are issues of due diligence that if we had all the facts, we might want to look into, but we're not going to get them. So I don't know that we can. So it is what it is. But she gets credit for the good things that have happened over the last few years, and she'll get that credit so long as she now goes out and makes another good choice, someone who's going to support the football program. We continue on this trajectory. She'll hire somebody other than that, then she no longer gets any credit for anything.
Well, I think she's walking a very thin line. There's a lot of people that like her, and just as many people, I think, that don't like her. And it opened up a real rabbit hole for her, because the people that don't like her, and I can say this because I'm hearing it from people who I think know it, that she could be on some shaky ground here. Because, these quotes that you make when you hire somebody, they can come back to bite you, as Marc said, a man of integrity. But, you have to look at it from another standpoint. She was given information about this guy. She took the information that what she knew about Mike Bohn, and that's why you pay the big bucks for the firms to tell you, here's the best candidate for you at this time. But she did sign off on it, and that's the bottom line. She signed off on it, but she does get a chance. I think Chris brought up a good point. She gets a chance to kind of redeem the perception of it all. If she makes a great hire and everyone goes, wow, that was a good hire, then this will kind of just fade into the background, and she won't take the bows and arrows like she should, which takes us to the next question here. Although USC retained a lawyer specializing in sexual and gender-based harassment and who conducted inquiry regarding these allegations, would Mike Bohn still be the Trojans athletic director if the Los Angeles Times' own investigative story had never appeared? Mark, what do you think?
No, I think I touched on this at the beginning of the show. Eventually, I think, he would have been asked to get out of the chair. So all the LA Times article did was kind of move up the timeline. They started asking around, and when Mike didn't want to indulge, that's when we get the Friday news done. So no, I don't think it would have made a difference. Eventually, he was going to be giving up that chair. Because like you said, like I've said, and what I wrote about, you go out and you hire this firm, you're doing it for a specific reason. You're trying to give whomever's making the allegations, and I'm not saying they're not true, I'm just saying what I've heard doesn't rise to the level. You want to make these allegations stick, and this is the firm you go get. This is what they specialize in. So again, all the LA Times article did was move up the timeline.
Eric, did they move up the timeline?
I think so. I mean, you're asking, would he still be the AD? Maybe today, but I don't think in 3 months or 6 months or whatever it was. I think it's interesting still that USC, when Carol Folt said on Friday, her letter came out, we're going to announce a transition team in the coming days, figure out how to move forward. It's Tuesday. I have not seen an announcement of a transition team. I have not seen an announcement of an interim athletic director, even to say, all the associate athletic directors, all the, the hierarchy that you have in place, even to just say we're all working on it together and the hole is filled for now and we'll go find somebody. That to me has been interesting, that it's been kind of slow to jump on that. And I know in higher ed and these kinds of things, it can take forever to have decisions go through all the different points where they need to go through. But that seemed like something where Monday morning, you'd at least hear, okay, we've got a plan and we're moving forward. So in that way, it makes me think maybe that did move it up pretty substantially. But I still can't get over the idea that, right, USC knew that this was going to happen. I think that we're seeing, though, a little bit that maybe the timeline shifted on him.
Chris?
I'm not sure the timeline shifted, actually. Maybe it did, but I think it's more likely that Mike Bohn resigns because he has a choice. Either he can resign and they can cut a deal, or he can be fired. And all of this stuff then becomes a public fight, which neither side wants. And so he cuts a deal, signs off on a confidentiality agreement, takes his check, and then issues a press release. And the press release implies that Mike Bohn is leaving because of health concerns, which people inside Heritage Hall, some of them, seriously doubt, because the law firm was not investigating Mike Bohn's health. They weren't poring over his medical records. I think it's quite likely that people at Heritage Hall saw that press release and said, oh, no, you don't. The whole point of this was that we were not going to litigate the reasons for your leaving, and I'm not going to have you imply that it's about your health when we all know it's something very different, especially when Carol Folt knows that there's going to be a certain amount of blowback on her as a result of this. Mike Bohn is probably a pretty popular figure with USC alums, particularly alums that care about football and give a lot of money, right? For a good reason. And so Carol Folt looks at it and says, okay, I know I'm going to have some unhappy people. I know I'm going to have people that I ask for checks from who are going to be leaving voicemails for me who are unhappy. And then Mike wants to do this on the way out. He wants to say that, well, it's about my health. I don't think so. And so she then issues a press release that doesn't say anything about Mike Bohn's health, but does say something about a law firm investigation, and anonymous sources inside Heritage Hall start to feed just a little bit of information so that, I think that's the most likely outcome here. I don't know the Times reporter. I don't know when the investigation started, but my guess is that's how it plays out. They get the press release. They call their sources inside Heritage Hall. Sources inside Heritage Hall are upset with Mike Bohn. They say, I'm not going to let him get away with this. You want to know what this is about? They feed some information at the Times, and then we have this. That's my guess. Okay, Kulkin, let's hear it. Why does that not make sense?
They don't feed information at the Times that's going to make USC look this bad. They just don't.
Oh, no. USC was going to look bad. When the athletic director resigns, effective immediately, they don't have a story that makes sense. They don't have a replacement. And the athletic department is looking at making some gigantic decisions. That already looks bad. The question is whether Mike Bohn gets to set the narrative.
No, they're not going to. They've been down that road. They're not going to let him set the narrative. You release your statement first. That's why I don't believe they release the information to the Times. I think
did they release their statement first?
I'm sorry?
Did they release their statement first? I saw
Mike Bohn's came out first, then Carol Folt.
Exactly. They didn't get to control the narrative.
But why would they allow him to do that? They had already received.
Who says they allowed him to do it?
He had already received his letter of resignation.
Who says they allowed him to do it?
Immediately, we're putting out our statement first. We received Mike Bohn's letter of resignation. Yada 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 yada. All of a sudden, then Mike Bohn's resignation statement comes out. That's how it's done. You know that, Chris. They're not going to let Mike. They're not going to let Mike race to the finish line.
Mark, you're missing the point. That's not how it played out.
I know how it played out.
And if that's not how it played out, what might have happened? Mike Bohn may have jumped the gun and offered his explanation. In which case, I don't buy that
theory, Judge. I don't buy that theory.
I know you don't, but I think you're probably wrong.
Okay. USC has been in this situation enough times recently that they're not going to shoot themselves in the foot.
Wait, who's USC? Hold on. Let's be very clear about what I'm saying. What I'm suggesting is that one of the employees that worked for Mike Bohn that was very unhappy with him and thought they were mistreated by him, that one of those people is likely to have fed the information. I'm not suggesting that Carol Folt did it. Carol Folt signed the confidentiality agreement that I suspect exists. I'm saying there are people in Heritage Hall who think Mike Bohn's a bad guy who deserves to get fired, who did not want him to walk away from this with that as the story. That's all I'm suggesting. I'm speculating, we all are, but I think that's the most likely explanation for what happened.
Well, in terms of speculation, we have to do a kind of a backstory on this. We know that this investigation has been going on for a while, so it's not exactly within the confines of the John McKay Center. They've known what's been coming down. It's also, a race between what they find out, what the Times finds out. There might have been a timeline when they were going to ask for the resignation of Mike Bohn, but that timeline got disrupted because the Times did say at the end, do you have any comment on this, Mike Bohn? Do you have any comment on this, Carol Folt? She saw that. She knew they were going to run the story, and they wanted to get ahead of the story. So therefore, boom, boom, they all get ahead of the story of the Times. Then the Times does come out. My feeling is that they probably were going to get rid of him, but it was what they wanted was on their time, and it didn't happen that way. So boom, boom, and there it was, and they kind of got caught unprepared with the transition team. I know Eric brought up a good point. You think by Tuesday they would already have mentioned who is going to be the interim, but I think it disrupted their plans. Now, we know about this investigation prior to Bohn's resignation. Do you think the results of that inquiry should be made public, Mark?
Which results?
Of the investigation by the firm.
I don't think anybody's names need to be doxxed or anything like that. Again, if it's something that is as salacious as everybody wants to make it out to be, or at least some people would like to make it out to be, yeah, let's get the facts out there. But if it's, stuff is, that I wrote about is, just being just a goofy old 62-year-old guy who's just, born in a different era, talking about, hey, you look nice today. And, he's a big guy. When you shake someone's hand, you might put your free hand on someone's shoulder. If it's up to that level, I don't know. I think we're beating this horse as hard as we can right now.
Erik, do you think that the results of that inquiry should be public?
I don't necessarily think that all of them should. I think USC, I think it would be a good decision from them to do that. USC, for me at least, whenever you see anything kind of from the Pac-12, and whether it's financials or numbers or anything kind of specific, you see the 10 schools and then USC and Stanford decline to provide anything, right? And because they're private, they don't have to. And it has felt for a long, long, long time that USC has used the ability to hide behind that curtain to foster a culture of where this stuff happens all the time. And so it feels like if you start kind of thinking this stuff's going to be out there, we're going to be more public with this, maybe the behavior all over campus and in every department starts to get better. Again, I would not expect it to. USC has really never been forthcoming with anything like that. I do think that it would maybe not answer everybody's questions, but again, put stuff out there and, hey, here's what we were dealing with. This is our decision. I could understand them not, because maybe then that sets a precedent to where now everyone expects you to release everything. And hey, since you released this, why aren't you releasing this? And that probably doesn't put USC in a spot, where they want to be. I'm assuming all of those state schools, when they have to send those numbers out, would rather not. And so the fact that USC and Stanford have the ability not to do that, that's something that they take advantage of every single time they can.
Chris, I know that you're going to look at it from a lawyer's perspective, but do you think that this inquiry report that Carol Folt got, do you think that should be made public and transparent?
Well, I don't see any way that it could be, because if you're going to push out a high-ranking public figure like this, both sides have some interest in keeping the sordid details out of it and avoiding litigation. And so I suspect there was a confidentiality agreement that both sides were more than happy to sign off on. Now, separate question. Do I as a fan want to know what happened? Yes, because the USC administration has not earned our trust. They don't deserve it. For a very long period of time, they have engaged in, and I'm not talking about Carol Folt specifically because a lot of this predated her, but we're talking about a university that has tolerated and encouraged some hideous behavior, largely because they could make a buck off of it, or because they didn't care, or because they were incompetent, or because they were corrupt, all kinds of reasons why. USC does not deserve our trust. They haven't earned it. And there's no reason for me to suspect that they got this right. Now, I do think Marc is engaged in a little bit of speculation. He's talking about hand on the shoulder. I'm sure that those who are friendly to Mike Bohn are telling people, hey, that's what it was about. We don't know what it was about. Not a single one of us does. But if you're asking me, do I trust USC to do the right thing? The answer is no. Why would I trust USC to do the right thing? When did that start? Because it's not what they've done over the past decade or so. And if you have a culture that where bad decisions are made and bad conduct is accepted, and the sort of shenanigans we've seen for a decade plus, you don't have the right just to tell people, well, trust us, we're doing the right thing. Well, no, I don't.
Well, I tell you, I think that from a fan's point of view, I think we'd like to know a little bit more specifics about it. But in a lot of ways, you say to yourself, okay, the damage, whatever it was done. Bohn is gone. It's time to look forward. Let's do that in this discussion of the first half. Panel, how will the departure of Bohn affect the transition for the Trojans into the Big Ten? And what obstacles do you see during this transition period, Marc?
Well, they need to have somebody in place. I mean, this is a huge move. I mean, we're not talking about going from, apartment A on the first floor to, the penthouse upstairs. They're moving to the penthouse, but they're moving zip codes, and there's a lot of nuance, a lot of details involved here. I mean, try walking without your big toe. You're going to fall over. Right now, Lincoln Riley doesn't have a boss. Nobody in the athletic department has a boss. So, if we're concerned about what's been going on in the past, kind of free reign right now. And you don't want that kind of stuff going on when you're in a huge transition mode. So, like Erik said, can we start seeing a plan in place now? You made a big decision on top of a bigger decision. Let's start seeing what's going on.
If we need a big toe, I suggest Sergeant Holcomb.
Very insightful. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Erik?
It's Erik's turn. I just threw that out. I'm not going to talk now. I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait and criticize whatever he says.
I think Erik's trying to get himself together after that. He's kind of conceptually the big toe, the whole thing. Erik?
Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah, right. And so the big decision was made. Marc's right, but there are so many, and I'm not even going to call them little things. There's a lot of still big things to be figured out in this whole thing. That you almost need someone with an understanding of everything that's gone on to this point. But if you have made a decision that the culture needs to change and everything about kind of how the department has worked needs to change, it's really difficult to now get someone who's been involved with all of that and put them in there. So that's going to be interesting to watch. I would guarantee that there are athletic directors out there who have seen this and would absolutely love to step into this situation based on what USC has shown recently that they're going to put into the football program, and maybe finding a little bit more solid footing now that you have all five toes, to be able to move into a conference like the Big Ten, right? I mean, every Big 12 athletic director, all the other Pac-12 athletic directors, not saying they're all looking to bail, but you figure you can get an ear of someone who knows what they're doing and says, yeah, that's a situation that I could kind of hit the ground running in. I've got ideas about that sort of thing, and know enough about the move to where maybe you don't need someone who's been involved kind of in a play-by-play of it all the way through here. I think there's a lot of options out there that would be able to facilitate this and move forward. I think the Big Ten, maybe outside of, I think it was the Northwestern president today that had some thoughts about the two LA schools joining, but I think they're excited to kind of work with USC, UCLA. How do we make this the best for everybody? So you're going to get some help. I don't see the Big Ten saying you don't have an athletic director, you can't come to the Big Ten anymore. So I think that USC is still overall in a pretty solid position making this hire. I think it's still an attractive place. Anyone who can go be Lincoln Riley's boss and some of those other coaches seem like you're not walking into the chaos of Clay Helton being there and having to figure out what to do with a football program.
Chris?
Yeah, so I agree with both these guys that there are significant decisions to be made regarding the Big Ten, but it's not just the Big Ten. It used to be that what you wanted out of your athletic director is somebody who would be a competent administrator, somebody who would be good shaking hands with alums and getting people to write checks, and who could occasionally hire a coach and do that well, right? That's sort of what you wanted. When you look at it, not only is USC moving into the Big Ten, which is going to require, it's going to require a political skills and a vision that not just every athletic director will have. But on top of that, you have the NCAA is falling apart. It's going to be replaced by something. We don't know what that something is. We have NIL rules that need to be made by somebody. The NCAA, probably not. Congress, state legislatures, conferences, or is it going to be done by collective bargaining agreements because athletes are going to become employees? I think that's what's going to happen. Whether that's something that we want to happen or not, I think it's almost inevitable at this point. Somebody has to deal with that. You're not talking about somebody who can go into a room, give a good speech, slap some people on the back, and walk out with a check for 50 grand. You're talking about somebody who has a deep understanding of this chaos that is college football and college sports right now, and has the political skills and the vision and the intelligence to work through all this and not only figure out what USC should be doing, but then has the skill to try to mold events in USC's favor. You're talking about a huge job at this point. And it's not just a normal athletic director job. And so was Mike Bohn the guy to do that? Honestly, don't know. Mike Bohn did a great job of hiring a football coach, and I love him for it. And he did what I've been begging USC to do for a long time, which is ditch the Pac-12 and go to the Big Ten. He did that. Does that mean that he had a handle on all this other stuff? I have no idea. I don't know who does have a handle on this other stuff. But you're talking about somebody who would ordinarily be somebody you might want to consider for CIA director rather than an athletic director, because it's that level of complicated. And that's going to be hard to find somebody who can do all that and do it well.
I think that they'll be fine as far as the transition once they get the guy in place. It's going to delay a lot of decisions, but they'll catch up. I don't think that's going to be an issue. Let me ask you this. Does the departure of Mike Bohn affect the football program, recruiting, any of it, Mark?
I don't think it will have too much of an effect. I mean, here's an interesting question. I'll just throw it out there. We knew who Mike Bohn's chief of staff was when Brandon Sosna was at the helm. The name Sam Adams never comes up, and that's been his chief of staff since Brandon left, who typically would do a lot of the stuff that Chris was just talking about behind the scenes. So, is Sam Adams the person to help navigate this process while they're looking for the next athletic director? You've got Annie Hansen, who runs the recruiting department. So I don't think there's going to be any effect there. Lincoln Riley and Annie Hansen and that whole thing, they've got recruiting on lockdown. Now, do you want to have somebody, in charge who you can introduce to and say, hey, this is the athletic director, and these are some of the other virtues that the university provides you besides playing football? Yeah, you need to have that person in place. So they need to do something relatively quickly, but I think now you might hear that name Sam Adams maybe come to the forefront, since that was Mike's right-hand person once Brandon decided to go off to the NFL and the Detroit Lions.
Erik, is this departure by Bohn affect the football program in any shape or form?
No, Lincoln Riley affects the football program. That's in place. He's his own athletic director for football. When football splits off from the schools and we have semi-professional college football, whenever that comes, and like Chris said, the players become employees, the head football coach runs that department and works as his own boss. And I think that's some of these coaches, there's a handful of coaches in the country that I think hold that position. I don't think that Mike, the athletic director, is there to serve what Lincoln Riley needs and wants to run that program. I would hope someone's there to kind of rubber stamp that kind of stuff for now. And then when whoever gets there starts just saying, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can do that. So that's kind of what I see the responsibility for that. Remember when when Pat Hayden would go on recruiting trips, and I feel like USC didn't land like a single kid that they brought him to go in on. So no, I don't need my athletic director to be involved a ton in recruiting.
Chris, what do you think? Is this going to have any effect on the football program, this transition?
I'd be surprised if there were any USC football players who chose USC because of Mike Bohn. I'll be surprised if there are any that don't choose him when he's gone. And Eric's right. Lincoln Riley is in a very special position in terms of the power that he's going to wield. Maybe not the kind of power that Nick Saban has, but you know, let's put it this way. Lincoln Riley doesn't have to give out game balls to the athletic director and call them coach. He doesn't have to. If he wanted to, he could tell the athletic director to get out of the locker room because this is just for the team and the coaches. That's the difference between Lincoln Riley and his predecessor. And so, no, it doesn't affect the football program unless this allows those power centers in the university who do not want USC to be a football power, if they get their way with the next hire and they get a leg up, because then every time there's a major decision about is the university going to commit X resources to do what Lincoln Riley wants, that will help them defeat it. And look, don't kid yourself. There are a lot of people at USC who don't want USC to be a football power. They don't. And so it can have a long-term impact to the extent that the university backslides on what they did a couple of years ago when they brought in Lincoln. I hope they won't, but if they do, then things could get dicey at some point down the road. But in the near term, Lincoln Riley's not changing his day-to-day at all because Mike Bohn is gone.
And I'll wrap up this particular question. I don't think it's going to affect it whatsoever. Lincoln Riley's going to run his show, which he should. That's why he's getting paid the big bucks. And I think what he wants most of all is just find me somebody I can work with. And I will say this, he will have a big say who the athletic director is. I will assure you of that. Okay, we're going to wrap this segment up and then we'll go and run through the rest of the show in quick order. But although USC has announced it will conduct a national search for its next athletic director panel, who do you think SC should go after to fill the new athletic director position? Now, you can give me one name or two names on who you think should be. Again, we don't know whether these people are really interested in the job or said thanks, but no thanks. We will find out eventually, if not sooner rather than later. But Mark, who do you want to see, or what couple of guys would you like to see, get the job?
All right. The obvious answer everybody wants at the top of the list is going to be Brandon Sauce's name, just because he came in with Mike, helped lay the foundation. He knows the vision and the direction. He was a big part of the reason why they got Lincoln Riley, and I think Lincoln Riley would sign off on that yesterday if he was the number one candidate.
Mark, let me ask you a question on that, if I could. Do you think that Sosna's relationship with Bohn is going to be a problem for him? Do you think that Carol Folt will say, I want a clean slate now? And how much did Brandon Sosna know what was going on, and should he have reported it? What do you think?
Well, if he knew what was going on, he knew about it back in Cincinnati.
Does that cancel him out as a number one candidate in your opinion?
In some people's minds. I don't know. I'm not in Carol Folt's head. I can't answer that question. But again, so he's going to be I think everyone's number one candidate just for the reasons I mentioned. Now, you want somebody who is going to be football friendly. We've all talked about that, and that's what you're going to want. So, you've heard the name, the athletic director's name over there at Texas. That would be someone who you'd be interested in. But just a couple of other names I'll throw out there, just because of the situation USC is in, as far as, projects that they're involved in, making the transition. And I think we touched on it really lightly about someone who's going to move to LA, Southern California. You got to be able to enjoy that type of lifestyle, that cultural move, especially if you're coming from another part of the country. So UCLA is moving with USC to the big conference. Their associate athletic director, her name is Erin Adkins. She works really closely with the football and men's basketball team, heavily involved in compliance. We know USC is a big thing about compliance. So that would be someone I would put there on the list. One other one, how about, since everybody wants to go get Greg Byrne from Alabama, you're not going to get him. And this person, I think, just became Georgia Tech's athletic director last year. His name is Jay Batt, but he was the number 2 guy right behind Greg Byrne at Alabama. So if you want somebody who knows how to raise money and is football friendly, I think those are some good candidates.
Erik?
Well, when we did the hot board when USC was looking for a head coach, I put Lincoln Riley on that both times that I did it, because if you're serious about football, that's a call you have to make. Gene Smith is the first call, right? If you're serious about trying to do this and make that move, you call Gene Smith. If he says no, I'm going straight to Pat Chun at Washington State. I think he checks off a ton of boxes. He spent 15 years at Ohio State. He understands the Big Ten. He is on committees all over the NCAA and super influential. If, like what Chris is talking about, you want someone working for USC who is a decision maker nationally on some of this stuff. And he just got told by Washington State, oh, by the way, you can't spend any money for the foreseeable future. If I'm an athletic director, that's an easy decision. All right, let's go somewhere where they're going to make an extra $25 million a year now, or whatever that number ends up being. That to me, again, I don't know if he is looking at all to leave. He's a native of Ohio. He did not go to Washington State. There isn't like a deep connection there. He's shown an interest in football. He has done a ton of fundraising. To me, that's kind of an easy call, and was definitely on the list back before they hired Mike Bohn too. Again, I think that there's still a lot of options out there. But I don't, if I'm USC, again, with the hiring of Lincoln Riley, you proved we don't need to go get anybody's assistant for anything, unless for some reason it's just, you absolutely know this person is the next big thing in all of this. I think you just look at who's doing the best job of this right now, who understands the changing landscape and is going to be an influential figure, and that's who you go get.
All right, Chris.
I don't have any idea, but I'll say a couple of things. One, Smith at Ohio State is actually a domer, so that would be interesting. I met him once too, but I doubt if he remembers.
I'll get him off the list. Anybody who spends time with Chris.
Exactly. He didn't spend time with me. I met him. Chris Del Conte at Texas hired Steve Sarkisian. That means he's out. If you hire Steve Sarkisian after Washington and USC did, you're out. I don't care if you check every other box. It doesn't matter. But the truth is, I don't know, because I went through the list of really complicated, difficult issues that the next athletic director is going to deal with. I couldn't tell you what Pat Chun or Chris Del Conte or Gene Smith think about much of any of that. And frankly, because I don't anticipate they're going to have to hire a football coach anytime soon, I'm not sure that their success in hiring football coaches in the past is the most important thing to me. So I don't know what to make of it, but I do agree with Erik that it's probably going to be a pretty appealing job, because you have, if you're going to be judged at USC on the state of the football program, this is probably a pretty good time to take over as athletic director, and you're going to have a lot more money coming in. So I suspect they'll have ample candidates.
All right, I'll start off with Brandon Sussman. I think is a person that is would be a serious consideration, but remember, he has no athletic directorship. I know he was the right-hand man of Sussman, but there's a lot of difference between being the assistant coach and the head coach, no matter how good you are as an assistant coach. Chun seems to check all the boxes to me. I understand he was a strong candidate the first time around. I'm not so sure. It's as long a long shot as you can get. But Greg Byrne from Alabama has a couple of things that come to my mind, and that is, one, Is he going to be? Does he want to be around to pick the next Alabama head coach? I don't think Saban's going to be there in 5 years. At least I don't think so. Possible, but I don't think so. And does Bohn really want that? His background was at Arizona. He's familiar with the West Coast. Is this where he'd like to kind of conclude his career? I don't know. But, it's worth it. Make him say no. Let's put it that way. And then move on. But it should be fascinating. One guy that I think that could sneak in as a potential candidate is from Georgia, Magdi El-Shawy, who was at SC. And I know that he's very, very good. I've had dinner with him in some group gatherings. Just a wonderful person. Remember, he played football at Florida State, I think for Bobby Bowden. Magdi he's definitely academic. He would check all the boxes. He left USC, from my understanding, because he was totally dissatisfied with the dysfunction of the athletic department and couldn't take it anymore. So I think that given the situation, this is a whole different ball game now with the SC athletic department. It's a place that you don't want to avoid. It's a place where you could do some things. So,
hey Chris, when are you having dinner with Gene Smith?
I'll let you know. We're still trying to work it out. He's not returning my calls for some reason.
All the options. We have to have dinner with all the potential USC ADs apparently.
Well, my understanding is that the WeAreSC inside the Trojans Huddle will have a sit down to get our feel on who we think should be the recommended candidate. I think that's kind of a given. All right, let's zoom through some of this other stuff. Halftime here. With the departure of Mike Bohn, how big an effect will that have on Reggie Bush getting the Heisman Trophy back and the possibility of Reggie Bush's number 5 jersey hanging in the peristyle end of the Coliseum on opening day against San Jose State? Chris, what do you think? Any effect?
I have no idea what the Heisman Trust is going to do, although I suspect they'll eventually back down and give him the trophy back. But when it comes to putting the number 5 jersey up, why are we waiting for any permission from anybody? The NCAA isn't going to do anything about it. Put that jersey up, put it up there now. Quit being wimps about it. This is embarrassing at this point. Get that jersey up there.
Mark?
First order of business for the next athletic director. You want to make friends? Like Chris said, put it up. What are we waiting for? And I'd take it a step further. I would go get the Heisman out of the basement and put it back in Heritage Hall. Put it in its rotation. What are they going to do? Are they going to actually come to
say if you do that against our wishes, your school will no longer be eligible for the Heisman Trophy? They could do that.
Go ahead and run with that narrative and see how well that works.
Well, I hope we don't have to run with that narrative to see how it works, but that's a possibility.
That would be political suicide. They would never do that. The Heisman Trust wouldn't go that far.
Eric, what do you think?
Bohn? Yeah, I mean, the disassociation period is over. The USC doesn't let anybody wear 5. It's retired. I mean, if you're not going to put it up, then let a kid wear 5. They all would want to. Dorian Singer wore 5 at Arizona. He came over. He's wearing 15 right now. So if you're not going to let people wear it because it's retired, then retire it. That's always been kind of confusing to me. Again, as soon I understand. And people wanted to crush USC all the time. There were 10 years where you couldn't do anything related to Reggie Bush. And I understand USC just decided that's the punishment. We're going to do that. We're going to take the photos down and not mention him and all of that kind of stuff. As soon as it's up and he's back on campus and kids still aren't wearing 5, you've retired the number. You've retired it. So again, if that happens to open the season, that's kind of a good faith showing, I think, by the AD. The Heisman Trophy, I understand, because that's somebody else's decision, right? If the NCAA has decided that he was not eligible, and then the Heisman Trust has said because he's not eligible, he doesn't have the Heisman Trophy, he's not the winner, then I understand displaying it as a gray area or whatever, if you want to make it a gray area. The jersey thing, you've retired it. And so that's not a gray area. That's pretty crystal clear to me.
All right, I'll just say this. This is what happens if you don't have I know that Mike Bohn was very pro Reggie Bush, so I think things would have really probably gone in Reggie's favor. Certainly in terms of the jersey hanging. I don't know what's going to happen with the push to get Bush's trophy back without an athletic director that's going to push the envelope on that one. All right, panel, if you had your choice for another opening schedule opponent in the Coliseum other than San Jose State, who would you choose of these three options or these options? Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, or Georgia? Chris?
We haven't played Georgia in 63 years, so I'd go with the Bulldogs.
Okay. Mark?
Yeah. I'm going to go with Michigan just because I would love for Lincoln Riley to have Harbaugh come across the field and ask, what's your deal?
Erik?
Yeah, I like the idea of Georgia. I mean, not just this year that they're defending champs, and that would be, huge for them to come. But like Chris said, a team you just haven't seen in quite a while.
I don't want to see Ohio State or Michigan. We're going to see them in the Big Ten anyway. Alabama, I think we've had enough of Alabama for a while, but I would like to see Georgia. I think that would be kind of a fun thing. All right, completing halftime here. If you could have any current rock and roll band play at halftime of a Trojans home game in 2023, who would you hire to play? Chris?
Current rock band, I would hire U2. If I can bring people back from the dead, I want a Beatles reunion. And I think the likelihood of getting those two bands is about exactly the same.
Mark?
What is a current rock band? Does that mean they're still performing?
Take it any way you want.
Yeah, my musical taste is so eclectic. I don't know. Give me Steve Miller Band.
Okay. Erik?
I honestly, I don't know if I could name a current rock and roll band. I have three young kids, the Beat Buds. Anyone with young kids out there, the Beat Buds. Hullabaloo too is someone to look into. I see some of the college kids when we're on campus and they look like they're about 8 or 9 sometimes to me. So maybe that's appealing to them. If we're bringing back people from the dead, it's Led Zeppelin in a pretty easy answer. I guess maybe not all of them back from the dead. We could get a couple of them, I think. Greg, I want you to give your son's band a plug here. That's actually who I'd love to see.
Well, I Cheek Face is my son's band. As I was mentioning before the show, somehow, some way, they appeared on the Times Square neon boards there, which to me is a sign. But given the fact of Cheek Face again, I would probably like to see the Rolling Stones in there. And if I could bring somebody from the dead, of course, the Beatles. But I think that would be kind of a fun thing to have. So let's get into the second half here real quickly. Panel, the Washington Huskies have been gaining a lot of steam and credibility by some pundits who are predicting that the Huskies will win the 2023 Pac-12 race. The Trojans host UW on November 4th in the Coliseum. That being said, the Trojans will also host Utah's Utes, who will be looking for their third consecutive Pac-12 title on Saturday, October 21st in the Coliseum. Panel, which of these two teams will give the Trojans the most problems in the Coliseum, Utah or Washington, Erik?
It's a good question. I think Washington. I think that quarterback wide receiver group is really good. I think Washington's got some really good defensive players, and I give the edge there because Washington has virtually everybody coming back. I don't think they had a player taken in the draft, and they have a ton of returning skill and talent on both sides of the ball. And I think that USC will be more geared up for Utah. That's a team that I would guess this. I don't know this for sure. If you asked every single player on the USC roster who is coming back from last year, if you could only win one game, who would you want to beat? I guess there'd be a lot of answers for Utah based on what happened last season. So for those reasons, I'm going to say Washington, but there's a reason Utah plays USC tough all the time. And I know that for a long time, there was that USC couldn't win in the Utah couldn't win in the Coliseum, which would shift things a little bit there, but I'm gonna say Washington of those two.
Chris?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to this, but I would go Utah for two reasons. One is because Cam Rising gives you a little more of the two-dimensional quarterback play because he can beat you with his legs. And second, because I haven't seen a USC player tackle Utah in a few years now, and I don't know if they can. So until USC manages to tackle a Ute, then I'm going to put Utah in that position.
To be fair, they haven't played Washington in a while, so you've seen the same number of tackles.
They tackle the same number. Yeah, right. I agree.
Right.
Marc Kulkin?
Yeah, I want to agree with Erik, but as good as their quarterback is, and they have some really good skill players, they got to get their offensive line figured out. So until that happens, I know Utah is going to come in and they're going to play the type of football Utah plays. They're going to be physical, and they're going to make you tackle them. So that's the only reason I'm kind of leaning towards Utah as far as who's going to give them more challenges. The USC Washington game is going to be a shootout. I need to see USC be able to play a physical game and send the message.
All right, I'm gonna say, because Utah is in the face of USC the last couple of years, I'm gonna say Utah is a hurdle that SC has to have. I think Washington's kind of been out of sight, out of mind. But of the two games, the Washington game could end up being the biggest game of the regular season. Panel, for your background information, the week before the Trojans host Utah, the men of Troy will battle at Notre Dame. As for Utah, the week before they play the Trojans, Utah hosts Cal. The week before the Trojans welcome the Washington Huskies, UW plays at Stanford while USC plays at Cal. Panel, which team, Utah or Washington, has the advantage prior to playing the Trojans? Erik?
Utah, I think, has the advantage there. USC is going to be coming off the trip to Notre Dame, which obviously is difficult. And then Utah too they go by, then home against Cal, then at USC. So the lead up for Utah for their own schedule is much more advantageous too.
Chris?
Yeah, that's obviously the right answer. Look, that Notre Dame game, if Notre Dame can beat Ohio State at home early that season, that Notre Dame game would be a battle of top five teams. And a USC Notre Dame game, when it's a battle of top five teams, is huge. Huge rivalry, huge build-up, long trip. That's going to be a challenge coming back from that one and playing well the following week.
Mark?
There's nothing more to add. They stated the situation perfectly.
All right, I agree. You hit the nail on the head on that one. All right, panel, saying this is a little tidbit. You can say yes or no on this. Is very simple. USC's homecoming game will be November 4th against the Washington Huskies. Does that incorporate into your analysis of the previous two questions? Erik, is it meaningless that homecoming is against Washington?
Yeah. Yes, it's meaningless. I don't know if the players have any idea. I mean, the homecoming is not what it was. I don't think the players have any idea when homecoming is. If the team is good and they're selling out or close to sellouts, you're not going to notice a huge change in the crowd for the players. So no, that doesn't change anything.
Chris?
I agree with everything Erik just said.
Mark?
Yeah, you used to schedule homecoming. You would schedule a bag me game, a guaranteed win. Today, that it's just a title on a game. There's no significance.
I'll say that it does have some significance from a Washington perspective, because since Washington hasn't played USC in a long time, and depending on the records of the two teams coming in, depending on where their position is in terms nationally, if I'm the head coach, DeBoer at Washington, I'd say, you know what? Not only do we know all these other facts, they schedule you for homecoming. What does that tell you about what they think of you? That's an insult to the Husky Nation. So it's just a little extra something that he'll toss in there at some point in time. I'll guarantee it. Okay, last question of the regular second half. Panel, who will be the most dangerous or most impactful quarterback for the Trojans to defend in conference? Utah's Cam Rising, Washington's Michael Penix Jr., or Oregon's Bo Nix? Eric?
Yeah, I don't want to slight Michael Penix, but it's Cam Rising. Cam Rising is Caleb Williams when he plays against USC, and he feels it too. I mean, I don't know if anybody has more confidence coming into a game than Cam Rising is going to have coming into the USC game, just again, based on results he's gotten. And it hasn't been right. Caleb Williams, when healthy, has been by far the best quarterback in the Pac-12 in the country, but Cam Rising is going to be good in that game. I think it's a guarantee. He's a veteran. He can run, he can throw, he understands that offense. He's going to be dangerous for Utah.
Chris?
The answer is Bo Nix, because playing at Oregon is a whole different animal. The other two guys they get in the Coliseum, and those guys are good football players, but USC probably wins those games in the Coliseum, but playing Oregon at Oregon, that is different. So I think Bo Nix is going to be the biggest challenge.
Mark?
If Cam Rising is healthy when they get to the Coliseum, he presents challenges. He's a tough son of a bitch. I mean, you can knock his helmet off and he's going to get back up and come right back at you again. His problem is, will he be healthy enough to play? I mean, he's got another ACL injury that he's rehabbing as we speak. But Chris brings up a really good point. Bo Nix at Oregon, that's just a different aspect to the game. But don't anybody forget, Michael Penix had better stats than Caleb Williams last year. So he knows how to spin it.
Chris has just such a reverence for Oregon. You can feel it when he talks about anything Oregon related.
It's a deep and abiding love is what it is.
Should we make room for him in the press box for that game?
I will say that on the surface of it, I would pick Cam Rising because he's got all the qualities that you've already said. But Nix, you never know what you're going to get sometimes with him. But at Oregon, if he's on, it's going to be a major challenge. Penix, I don't know how he reacts in the Coliseum at that time of the season. SC is going to have a better defense. How much better, we don't know. He'll give SC some real challenges in trying to keep him without scrambling all over the place. But for right now, I would say Cam Rising without a doubt. All right, we come to near the end of the huddle. Overtime, viewer questions, panel answers. It's time to answer some of the viewers' questions. It's an open forum panel, so feel free to jump in with your answers. Question 1 from Boulder to Birmingham, from St. George, Utah. I know it's early, but any insight into what really happened at the athletic department that led to Mike Bohn's leaving? I think we answered that. Are you concerned that I'm about the negative ramifications to the future of USC athletics? I think we touched on that. But
let me throw something out real quick. I know ESPN isn't the end all be all, but when people go to sports news, that's typically at this point where people gravitate to. If you look at the college football page, which again, it's the off season, but they have kind of the top headlines in the top right. There are 6 stories in there. And again, this is Tuesday afternoon. 2 of them are about Glenn Schembechler at Michigan and that whole thing, which broke kind of around the same time-ish that Mike Bohn's thing did. Nothing about Mike Bohn, right? So if you're looking at like what story is going to carry, where are people kind of digging in and looking, you just don't see a ton of like, oh, this is going to cripple USC athletics sort of moving forward. Again, who knows what's coming out days, weeks, months at this point going forward, but it honestly feels like maybe it's not fully run its course, but definitely not something where it's, constant talk about here it is again, and this is going to ruin things and all of that stuff when it comes to perception.
Yeah, I think it's kind of all the negative stuff for the moment has been kind of already washed through this last weekend. I think when they start leaking or finding out who the candidates are, and I suspect they're going to be good candidates, it'll be not a negative thing, be a real positive thing. All right, question 2. Same question from both SC the One in the Orange County and Trojan Forever. I lumped them together. Who is your preferred replacement for the AD job at SC? Previously occupied by Mike Bohn. I think we did go over that one.
What we didn't talk about is who the interim should be, and I vote Pat Hayden.
Dude.
I was going to say Len Swan, but you could
Both
debate.
good choices.
What's Mike Garrett?
Excellent. What's that, Mark?
Yeah, Garrett's no longer at Langston, so he must be free. Maybe you could have the triumvirate, bring all 3 back, and have them do what they do.
There you go. The hat trick.
Yeah.
Or the Trojan helmet trick. Here's 2 other questions for SC the One. One panel. What is your guess for the average attendance this season at the Coliseum? Capacity is 77,500. The 2022 average attendance was 64,488. Okay, throw out a number that you think is going to be the average attendance.
74,488. 10,000 increase from last year.
Okay. Anybody else donating?
73, 74 sound about right to me.
It'll be between 70, 77.
I think it'd be about 73 if they didn't have San Jose State and some of the others in the early part of the season. Okay, second question. What is your guess for the average attendance this season at the Galen Center for men's basketball? Capacity is 10,258. 2022-23 attendance was average 4,021. What kind of increase do you think is going to take place now that Ronnie James is coming to the Galen Center and Dennis Rodman's kid, plus the National Player of the Year? So
4,023. We'll have LeBron and Rodman there.
That's, literally that is what I was going to say. Far less of a percentage increase than for football. The basketball fans, they've got to show it. The schedule is going to be, they're going to play at the same times. You're going to have weekday games where fans get down there at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, and USC fans just don't do that. I think the students will be there. I think the students will be great. So I'd say it'll bump maybe a couple thousand, but maybe it'll get to 5,500. I think that you'll have a sellout or 2 this season, maybe more, but the average attendance, it's not going to 8,000, 9,000, anything like that.
So I'm already on record. I say it's going to be between 7,000, 7,500. And I've actually asked already. They have seen a little bit of an uptick in season ticket sales already. So I'm not saying it's going to be significant, but like you said, people want to come see Bronny play. They're going to want to see the #1 recruit play. And they're going to want to see LeBron James hanging out. He's got nothing else to do now.
Is a little bit of an uptick too? Because Chris could still be right with a little bit of an uptick.
No, they're seeing an uptick with season ticket requests.
I'll try and
get a number for you.
Does LeBron have to buy a season ticket, you think? You think they're going to make him put up the cash?
Look, this is a completely different conversation. Could he take a year off next year and just serve as like a dad coach with the team for Bronny's potentially 1 year and then both go back to the NBA?
That would be horrible.
Or what would happen if LeBron James becomes the head coach at USC? After all, Andy has not won a Pac-12 title in 10 years?
Why can't Rodman be the coach? I don't understand. Dennis Rodman as head coach would be very entertaining. I'm in favor of that.
Today's culture, he might fit in perfectly too.
I say their average attendance will be around 6,200. Again, I'm looking at average. All right, question 3 from Trojan from the Valley. For next season, predict USC's average points per game on offense. How many points do you think the USC will give up on defense? And how many games does the USC defense hold opponents under 17 points, if any? All right. Predictions.
45 points a game offense, 22.5 on defense, and they'll have 2 opponents under 17.
Okay, I agree with Chris on this. What about
All of it? The whole thing?
Yeah,
Exactly.
Let's just call it a wrap then, fellas. I guess we're done.
I think they might hold Nevada under 17. I think everybody else gets over. I think they can give up more like 26, 27, but still show a ton of improvement. 45 on offense sounds fine. Maybe a couple more than that, 46, 47.
Yeah, I'm in the 45-point range. Just give me 25 points or less on defense. And if you can't win with a 3-touchdown advantage, you don't deserve to win, period.
All right. Now I saved the best question to end the show from Scott in Gilbert, Arizona. He says, as I can only imagine, by the time this question is read at the end of the show, you'll have covered some pretty deep topics involving Mike Bohn and his replacement options. So I will ask you something more on the light side. With the 2 big recruiting weekends coming up in June, if you were invited to the bash at Lincoln Riley's house, what would you like to see served for dinner that would really impress you and your family?
Not his brisket.
Why would you say?
There's no way he hasn't gotten better at that. There's no way. There's no way. I would bet that he spends, I know he has young kids. I would bet he spends a huge chunk of his free time working on that. And in a few years, he's gonna put another picture out of the Easter brisket, and it's gonna be incredible. And it's gonna be the greatest redemption arc in college football coaching history.
It doesn't matter what he serves, because the view that you're going to be eating and looking at is going to make the food taste great. It doesn't matter.
Now, for people that don't know what we're talking about, the brisket, fill them in on the biscuit episode. What is that all about?
It was well done.
There was just a photo that he put out. And when you're coaching in Oklahoma, there are some Oklahoma-based barbecue fans that took exception with the doneness, I think, of the brisket.
And he's a Texas guy too, so you would think that, it's not like this was his first time dealing with brisket. But I think, look, this is what USC should do to show the power of USC and our ties to the entertainment world. We should have every living Iron Chef there at Lincoln Riley's house preparing dinner.
So what I would want to see, and I haven't hammered out all the details on this. I would like a 12-course menu of the 12 opponents coming up that year, the mascots. Now, I don't know what to do about the human-based mascots, right? So that's a question that we have to figure out. But there's enough animals and some exotic animals that I think you could really impress some people with.
Excited about that husky? You excited about that barbecued husky?
Again, this is a private event and it's a showpiece. I'm not advocating that you need to do this. I said there are some mascots that you need to figure out a way around on how to do that. But the idea, right? The idea is there.
Eric, did you just watch Temple of Doom and crave some monkey brains and snake?
I checked. There's no monkeys on the schedule. Chris is right. The dog becomes some, initiate, and you've got another dog-ish, a wolf.
A little bit troubling. I mean, nobody wants to eat bear.
I think we should
have it, right? A big bear splayed, and you need 2 of them too. I mean, that's really where you get into it.
I think what you need a guest chef, and I'm going to recommend Hannibal Lecter. He can answer probably all those questions for you and do it in fine style. As for me, a luau would be perfect. Where else are you getting answers like this but inside the Trojans Huddle? And so once again, if you have a question or comments for our panel, go to either the WeAreSC message boards, click on the thread that pertains to Inside the Trojans Huddle viewers or listener questions. That'll do it for Tuesday's long edition, but very insightful edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle. So until next Tuesday, a big thank you again to our panelists. Great job, guys. Marc Kulkin, Erik McKinney, and Chris Arledge. And a special thank you to all of you for watching or listening to Inside the Trojans Huddle. Have yourself a great week. And until then, this is your moderator, Greg Katz, reminding you all to fight on, everybody.